Thanks for sharing, everybody. My name is John Guerin. I've been doing community organizing work here in Indianapolis for coming on 6 years, starting with the labor movement, moving into food justice, food rescue work, and more recently with the Indie Art Media Cooperative, which is opening up a tool lending library to help people share media tools like a ton of the ones I'm using today, actually, not the TV, but these other pieces. We're having our grand opening after the cooperative conference reception that Alvin passed a flyer out. So that'll be a joint venture next Thursday if you want to come by. Tasty Eats. We'll have a DJ. It'll be fun hanging out. Excited to talk to you all today about how do we access community power through local currencies and how that peer-to-peer practice can help us keep the value we produce local in our communities and not extracted by big corporate players. Why? Many of you may have experienced or felt this disconnection that here in Indianapolis I think is a feature, but I think is a feature of living in the United States. In Indianapolis, though, you may have experienced it running into somebody and you're like, why didn't I meet you 3 years ago? Or you see people doing the same project on different sides of town. But also with racial prejudice and other socioeconomic barriers that divide our community. Secondly, value extraction and how our work is sometimes taken for granted or even literally taken for free, this value we're producing. On a more macro level, thinking about like Uber and how 20% of the surplus of the profit from that industry is going to Silicon Valley now. And then lastly, I hope this will emerge from the presentation, this idea that bad money can create bad faith behaviors and that it creates these patterns by the way we interact with it and how we interact with each other based on our economic system. We did one of these workshops last month, and just to review a couple of the concepts that kind of build into today's conversation, this idea of consent-based organizing or agreement-based organizing, consent being critical for healthy adult relationships. Consent's a mutual agreement. An exchange is also an agreement and an interaction. And something else that I hope will become more apparent, might not make sense right off the bat, but money is only made real by the agreement of what it's worth. So if you're giving me something and I don't think it's worth anything, I may not give a service in return. Asynchronous decision making was another topic we talked about last time that's kind of important. Asynchronous, not live, so by text is asynchronous, by email. Skype is not asynchronous, though. That's live or in the meeting making decisions. And so some of the reasons I propose this being important is because it's more accessible, more inclusive, more open. Unhurried gathering of views can lead to collective intelligence. And one of the reasons why I bring this up for this presentation, too, is that even though we're spending money in real time, when you are checking your bank account, that's sort of an asynchronous message to you saying what you can or cannot do depending on how much is sitting in your bank account when you check the website or check your phone app or whatever. So I want to do a little activity to get us kind of loosened up and in the frame of mind. And so I want to think about, or I want you to think about the economic barriers of the community work you do, and work as in passion, as in vocation, but just in your experience in doing work with community, or even if you participate in a nonprofit project or different things. So we're going to take 1 minute to think about it on our own. Then we'll take 2 minutes to pair up into twos and talk about it. And then we'll do groups of 4, and then we'll return to the big group. So if folks just want to think, like, what are the primary economic barriers, and maybe trying to come up with 2 or 3 and just think for 1 minute, and then we'll pair up.
do you mean by barriers?
Barriers being anything that stops you from doing what you want to do within community or within even hobbies. You could think about like, this is something I really like doing, but I can't because of X, Y, Z. So somebody from this group would like to share maybe a couple points, maybe one you had, maybe one somebody else had, if anybody wants to.
I guess I'll start. One of the things that we pointed out was I'll say information and opportunity, and the two kind of go together, one for another. Like my man here said, knowledge is power, and if you know about some things, then there's something that you can pursue. If you don't know about it, you can't pursue it. Let alone even worry about having the resources and the the money to actually do it.
That's interesting. A similar idea came up in our group. If one of you want to share.
Well, we said basically the same thing, is that we might not get the word out to people about it, either because tech barriers, that they don't have the internet or know the site to go to look for these types of things, or are too occupied with jobs or their own events in life to even get the information out of something they might actually want to do and might actually have time for.
And there was one more group. You want to share a couple ideas?
A lot. I think everyone kind of agreed on the lack of public transit and transportation issues in general. And then we talked about trying to find balance with within working within the arts, but also needing to feed yourself. So there's that. And then access to social services or services that the community needs.
Does anybody want to share one more comment from any group?
Lack of resources, sometimes I know that's what we were talking about, was sometimes it's not also lack of knowledge, but just having people know that you need this, and they might not even be using, let's say, a drill that day, or an iPod or a phone, and they would be more than happy to donate something for a week or two, but it's just trying to gain those resources and maybe even a network of how to donate your tools, your materials temporarily or indefinitely for an organization that really needs it.
And for the budgeting aspect of the nonprofit, in order to get you to have money to send the word out, but if all their events are free, then the money that they want, so everyone gets the information.
Great. So I'd love you to kind of hold on to those ideas, and we're going to come back around to looking at them through a more solutionary sort of lens after the presentation. I just wanted to highlight briefly on the bad faith patterns, just for folks who might have less of the sort of macro lens. So we talked about some of the community pieces to that, but I don't know if anybody just comes to mind, what's a way that our capitalist economy, the way that money works today, is really damaging to communities on a broader scale.
Makes it harder for new companies, new ideas to emerge from these giant corporate entities. It's hard for one service that might seem a minute change that could be something really big and great, where you're trying to compete against a company like Google or Microsoft or Walmart or these big companies.
Private prisons driven by mass incarceration.
Yeah, definitely. Just watching 13th Amendment last night. Really intense. Just a couple other examples. These are from Robert Reich's Inequality. Forgetting the name right now, the documentary. Look under me. But just showing wages been stagnating 40 years while productivity has steadily increased. Debt has also been increasing over the last 30 years. Income, again, staying stagnant. You see, this is for males who do better than women and people of color and things like that. You see a drop in half of the medium salary minus household expenses. Meanwhile, the top 1% are doing great and taking a lot of that income home. And then on a really global level, you know, the harm from NAFTA environmentally, tons of pollution. That's not even to mention the damages to working families, women, and children, especially in Mexico. And it's getting worse. There's even worse proposals on the table with the Trans-Pacific Partnership. So let's flip the coin and look towards the more positive and what we can do about this. I'm going to be talking about a particular design of a local currency, a protocol, if you will, or a framework. And we'll take you through definition, vision, some current examples from today of different local currencies around the globe and here in the States. I've got 2 guests who will pop in, and then we'll go back into group discussion. So open money is not conventional or fiat money. So when you spend the US dollar, when you go to buy something, is that dollar coming back? Does it care about you? No. So we're this bucket, or this is the money that we've got in our pocket, and hopefully we have more coming in that we have going out so that we can continue to even pay for necessities, shelter, food, these things. Open money is really this idea about taking away the barrel, especially the bottom of the barrel, and really taking it into community control. If we are talking about a virtual currency, no bottom, or caps as the community determines in hopefully a more humanistic way. And just this general idea is that if I give Alvin 10 credits, Alvin's account goes 10 up, mine goes 10 down. There's no zero mark. It doesn't start at a particular point. It's just levels. This is just a measure. We say open money is free as in free speech, and also that we're taking open measure, that anyone can make a measurement of these things. This is the community way model. This is, hopefully will give a little bit more of a tangible view of this idea. This is a way we can implement an open money or a local currency. And it starts, like I said, everybody at zero, because it really doesn't matter. A community in Canada invented this in the 80s, and they had a big conversation. Oh, do we start people at 500 community bucks? Too much. 100? No, not enough. And they're like, wait, it actually doesn't matter. We'll just start everybody at zero. You can go positive, you can go negative. And so we start with approaching businesses, because we got to have bread and beer on this. You know, people want to eat, people want entertainment, shelter, you know, like people want to be able to sleep, right, to rest. And so we might go to, well, if the double eights were still here, we might go to them, but maybe we'll go to Roe and Earl's convenience shop, or maybe we'll go to even Kroger or some other business, and we say, we know that you will benefit from having visible a commitment to your community, that you want to be in good regard, in good standing with your community. And to make this commitment visible, we want you to donate, let's call them indie bucks, just for this example, to a community service organization, a nonprofit of your choice, one that you want to be associated with. Maybe it's Kepler Institute, maybe it's Boys and Girls Club. So we say, hey, please make this donation, and so then their account goes negative, Boys and Girls Club, Kepler Institute go positive. Now, Kepler Institute is already getting donations from people because they need supplies for the 3D printers that they're teaching kids how to use. So people are already donating money to this, or paying fees for the summer schools or things like that. So we're not really, in this whole model, we're not asking people to do anything that they're not already doing. Businesses already sponsor nonprofits. And so instead of a community service organization asking for just donations, we're saying we'll exchange US dollar for indie bucks. We can say 1-to-1, we could do it different, doesn't really matter. And so when that business originally made the commitment to the community, they also said, I will accept up to 20% of the ticket price. When you go out to eat at a pizzeria, the pizzeria might say, you know what, volume's most important to us, so we'll actually take 50% of your bill in indie bucks, 50% regular cash. Maybe the theater says 100%, you can come. Or maybe they say, we'll have tickets, but it's at the door, and only if they haven't been used, we'll give them completely for local currency. And so you see this pattern emerge, this cycle, and we get the money going around, basically. And staying in our community, most importantly. Some of you already saw part of this video. This is actually a newscast from the initiation. We're going to jump in part way here. Just in the beginning, they just described what I basically described here. Now some of the locals are talking about it.
Let's see how you do.
Peter Walford is a dentist starting a practice in a community where many people can't afford dental work. When he has canceled appointments or a slow day, he takes patients with green dollars.
In fact, I think without the system, I probably would have gone broke sometime over the last summer. Right now, we bring in an extra $500 to $1,000 a month.
The LET system works because it's more flexible than a barter system. If Gail needs some firewood, but Jeff doesn't need a sweater, in a barter deal, nothing would happen. But with LET system, you don't have to trade directly. You can credit green dollars as necessary to a central bank-style accounting system.
I wish to credit number 373 with 10 green dollars.
There are no debts, no interest charges, and no repayment schedules. This is how a transaction in the LET system works. How are you?
Fine.
Gail, the knitter, needs some dental work for her son. She goes to Peter Walford, who charges her 75% green dollars and 25% cash.
Yeah, come on, Peter.
Peter buys firewood from Jeff Thomas, 50% green, 50 cash, and phones in the transaction.
Number 478 with $70 green for firewood.
Jeff buys groceries from the food store run by LET system member Jim Laux for 20% green. And finally, Jim orders a sweater for his wife from Gail Pratt.
Hi, Gail.
Each person treats the green they earn as income. They keep careful accounts and put aside enough federal dollars to cover the income tax required. Very little cash has changed hands, but everyone gets what they need, and they stay in business. Linton has managed to launch 20 other LET systems across BC, the US, and into England. More and more high-powered economists and academics are intrigued by the idea. Economist and politician Eric Kearns sees it as an answer to a lot of people's needs.
They're looking for institutions where they can put their money and the money will stay within the community, you know, and be cycled and recycled back again from investment to consumer goods and back again. Right now, we put our money into institutions, and it could be down in Argentina, you know, buying guns or something like that, because the bottom line says that you can get 18% down there, or 22%, and only 12% in Canada, or something like that. And so much of our money hemorrhages right out of the country.
In spite of this kind of support, some people in Courtenay think it doesn't really work for business. Owner of a retail shoe business and member of the Courtenay Chamber of Commerce, Neil Woodrow.
It would never work in our retail business.
Why is that?
Well, we have to answer to a lot of people being in business. Number one, our suppliers. And if our suppliers heard that we were trading goods for services, that doesn't pay the bills. And also, all businesses, or most businesses, run on a line of credit at the bank, and I don't think the banks would be too receptive to trading merchandise for goods either.
Guy Dauncey, an economist visiting from England, is convinced it can work.
We have to remember that every single big new idea that happened, like landing on the moon or flying or understanding about meteorites, was really weird to most people. It's easier not to think about new ideas. And this seems to me something that could potentially become big.
All LET supporters are certain of one thing. It cannot be an alternative to our cash economy, but as an addition to it, LET system can create business where none existed before.
We think we've got an answer to the central issue. The central issue is the structural problems of money, and we've got a method.
Yeah, cut it there. I'm curious, just off the bat, like what stuck out to people? What was the most important thing that you heard?
The most important thing was at the very end, they said that it's not a substitute, it's an addition.
Mm.
So, and up until then, I was very skeptical, but as soon as I heard that they mean it as an addition, not as just a substitute, it really makes more sense to have a whole other subcategory for our economy as services and goods being traded in that manner instead of just currency and goods and services.
Mm-hmm.
And that just makes a lot more sense having that different cycle.
I also, at the beginning, with the dentist and the woman, like just how interconnected it all is, and
stay in the community. It's not a matter of just like giving money to someone you don't know so they can do something that's necessary. It's like helping each other. So, and it's not like an always that way sort of thing. It's special situations in which, you know, my son can give you firewood, I can give you sweater, you can give us the dentist, like stuff like that, where it's very interconnected. You get to know the people that you're giving resources to rather than just blindly like throwing money at something.
I thought it was interesting too at the beginning as well, where I think the dentist said that he would have gone out of business had that not been a supplement to the cash economy. So I thought that was pretty interesting.
Totally.
What stood out to me is the fact that they kept the money in the community. And I've heard of communities like that before, places like Rosewood, and some other places where they called on Black Wall Street. And some of these places, they were very successful, doing similar, to that, the same thing, where they would all have goods and services, and they would share those goods and services amongst each other, as well as export goods and services, bring more money into the community, but keep it there in the community where it works for everyone.
Totally. Yeah, I think that's really important, and the relationship building piece, I think, is really important. The other thing I would say really sticks out for me is this: people don't like to think about new ideas. And there is this piece of paradigm shift, because we've been thinking about money in the same ways for a long, long time. And there's a reason that there's not so many experiments around this stuff. And I think there's a big stigma and a lot of fear and a lot of emotion wrapped up into money, because it's our lifeline in many ways. Yep. Let's see if I can make it go forward. So just some characteristics of open money as opposed to the conventional money or fiat money, state-controlled money. Conventional money, when you spend it, goes away, not coming back. Open money, you have more guarantee of a return or a money go round of some sort. With conventional money, it's global, disconnects us in many ways, the extraction. Open money scales as far as trust does. Local first, but global ready. Our Skype guests are here with us. Conventional money, centralized creation and valuation, as opposed to open money, where anyone can easily start a currency or several currencies. Conventional money seems to assume one's a bad faith actor, whereas open money has more minimal barriers to entry, not so many hoops to jump through. You can, your word and your commitment, really, your commitment to perform an action, your commitment to your community, that's all it really takes. And we talked a little bit about some of the oppressive ethics and neo-colonialist behaviors that we see with conventional money, whereas open money can have reciprocity built in, again, this cycle. And conventional money, you have this interest in stockpiling it, whereas open money, there's no incentive to hoard it. And part of that is from the previous points that it scales as far as trust does. It only goes as far as you trust it to be worth, and it's only as far as people agree that it's worth something, that agreement is valid. And so if we give more people the ability to start credit systems, to start monies, then maybe this particular community currency won't be used in 5 years. And so there's less interest in hoarding it. It works when I use it now, in the here and now. And just a metaphor, or maybe a little more, there's some feminist qualities to it, as opposed to your patriarchal conventional money, where you have this like competitive power over instead of power with. Conventional money being stingy as opposed to generous, and conventional money being a hard money, and open money being soft but a significant promise nonetheless, because it's in the relationship that you're building with people. So I think, I got time for a couple examples, and then we're going to bring a Skype guest on. Is anyone familiar with time banking? Do you want to share?
Yeah, it's where people share primarily with services, so an hour of service, or if I, let's say, mow lawns and someone else does repair, like fix the appliances, we would trade an hour for an hour. So if I mow the lawn for an hour, they would help fix an appliance for an hour.
Yeah, so it's a currency based on time. They don't have to pay taxes that way, actually. 323, there's a lot of them. The big challenge, I think, to the time bank getting critical mass or mass adoption is that you can't buy product, you can't buy food, you can't buy shelter. It doesn't hit those basic needs, and so obviously there's less need for it. But still a valuable model, I would say. There's groups like Mutual Aid Network, I attended their conference, who are considering using several different credit systems, from the mutual credit like we're talking about today, time banking, sharing, more like the tool lending library, co-ownership situations. We were just talking about mutual insurances or like health shares that you can get instead of Obamacare. And they use one tool that's kind of neat, a posterity budgeting, where we can see how, okay, maybe I'm spending this much in food, this much in wellness, this much in transportation. These are my expenses that I'm, trying to match with my income. But as we move through the years and we build out these programs, maybe I'm able to make use of car shares a lot more. So my conventional currency goes up and I'm using some time bank hours. Maybe I'm participating in the community-controlled food initiative, the food share that Kepra hosts, and so my food cost goes down, and that's kind of like a saving pool, solidarity finance. Part of the tool lending library, I'm saving costs on equipment. The commercial barter industry is something that kind of proves some of the viability of these as well. They're moving over $12 to $14 billion. So this is the big dogs, and looking at what they're doing, they're using credits. They're using tokens as well. And this idea of indirect barter, that I don't have to need what you, or you don't have what I need, I don't have what you need, we can still do business through a local currency, and using apps that look much like the one that openmoney's developed. I'm gonna skip this example so I can pull on our guests. But I will just mention again, like there's a lot of models out there, and there's probably a couple hundred community currencies around the world. A lot of them are pretty flawed, and really there hasn't been that much experimentation in this realm, but there are a lot of examples to look to. Some of them are backed by fiat money, and they work just like traveler's checks, and really haven't proven to be any different than money because they're backed by the US dollar. But there's some, like the World Bank, that's been around for 80 years, so that's a good example to look to in terms of sustainability. Sardex is connecting different community currencies in Italy, and they are moving like 51 million, valued at 51 million euros of community currency and commercial barter. The Yusko I mentioned, especially because we're kind of a tourist location, or the conference tourism. They're using it in the Basque region of Spain to give discounts to locals at stores, but tourists who don't have access to the local currency have to pay the higher premium, which keeps value local. And let's give a call. This is going to be Garrett Lee. Whoa, where did it just, okay. Not Garrett Lee. Well, I'm going to give Michael Linton a call. Michael Linton was the co-founder of the LET system and now the openmoney system. And the community way model was developed by him, and that video of Canada in the 80s was of him. Hello, Michael. Can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Well, that's something. I can see John's ear and a fan spinning above his head.
I can give you the room a little bit more.
That's better. Hi. Hi. Good to see you. All good so far?
Yeah.
So, as per schedule, John?
As per schedule, yeah, you should go ahead. Actually, Garrett Lee is unable to make it with us today. So if you want to just introduce yourself, I've talked just a little bit that you're the co-founder of Let's, openmoney, part of the video. We watched some of that today. And I know, and just for the crowd, we're probably going to do mostly question and answer with Michael Linton, but if you want to take us away on any presentation that you've got put together, go for it.
Okay, well, you've had a broad intro to the basis of the problem. I'm getting some echo here. Oh my God, what about that? Yeah, shut my sound. That's all right. It's okay. I can sort of kill
If I
it
put
now.
them in?
Well, no,
It says,
do you have any headphones or earbuds that you could use?
yes, but I'd still be hearing you. It's I'm getting the audio from your end is coming through my speakers. I'll cut that. It's okay. If you need to say something, just speak your hands wildly, and then I'll know that something to say. Okay. So you've had the broad introduction, the problems which are evident. Lots of different understandings of them, but they all seem to come down to money problems at some level. I'm sure you've had plenty of personal experience. The latter part of this workshop, from again John's slides, you're going to get an introduction to what you can do about it. And that's really the key, because unless you've got something to do, then all the theorizing and considerations is irrelevant. And I guess my job is to, or my purpose, I don't know what my job is, my purpose today is to convince you that this is dead easy, or at least that it's worth exploring the possibility that it's dead easy. I don't believe it. It's a bit like the bike, you know, if you think about riding a bike, you'd never do it. You'd spend an awful long time contemplating the project. And we didn't learn to ride bikes by thinking, but learn to ride bikes by actually doing it. You've got to get in the process. And the same thing applies to community currencies, that unless we're in some way playing with the ideas in a functioning form, in a way that matters but not too much. If you go full tilt straight at the whole thing, then, well, the risks are higher. You're concerned as you're putting your time, your energy online. People are very conservative with these currency systems. So playing around with games is a very powerful way of exploring the edges, expanding it out without the risk factors, so that the basic ideas become clear to you. I've got to emphasize that, and I think you've seen a little bit about the resilience of these systems. John probably got around the VIR system in Switzerland that's been there for about 70 years. And commercial barter, that's very much the same thing as open money, except for business, by business, in business. There's time banks. There's all these networks that are all doing the same thing, which is basically the simple to and fro, the give and get of mutual credit. And in fact, in one stage, and just a brief little story, the Irish economy in the early 70s was run for an entire year on a system very like what we're talking about. There was a strike in the banking system, and you couldn't deposit checks or cash checks or take cash out of your account. The banks were shut. And in those days, the only monetary stuff you got was coin and bill and checks. That was it. No ATMs, no cards, no credit cards, no nothing. So when the banks weren't there, it was a big problem. But the Irish got around it by simply writing checks to each other. And then when I wanted to pay you, I took one of the checks that had been paid to me and I signed the back of it and gave it to you for £23.42 or whatever. So one just started moving checks around. And eventually some of the employers got into this, particularly the breweries. The breweries started paying their employees in £10, £20 checks. So they became the new currency of Ireland for a year with these checks in circulation by the brewers. It was the best year in the Irish economy in the 70s. We had less bankruptcy and less fraud than they do in the normal economy. So it was an experiment the banks did not like to repeat. It was quite clear you could do without them very nicely, in fact better than you could with them. Now the difficulty is the Irish forgot. They didn't realize what they'd done. And when the mainstream economy was back to usual, they paid no further attention. And I think that was a great mistake and a great loss, because we could, from well, even before the 80s, have had active community networks, even with the old models. Now with the new stuff, it's so easy, it's ridiculous. The software is getting better by the week. So the issue is not, can we do it? It's rather, can we do this intelligently? Can we do it? I want to say carefully, but without taking big risks. The big deal is avoid the risks. What can go wrong with a thing like this? So one has to understand what can go right and what can go wrong. And that's where we introduce one of the gaming things. This is the Let's Play game. One piece of paper, instructions on the back. Much less instructions in the Monopoly game. For Monopoly, you need 14 pages of this crap. This is just a game. You've got some money, federal money we call it. It's actually Monopoly money. And you're buying and selling from the shopping list and you mark the charts. It's a very simple game, although it looks a bit weird. It becomes clear in a few minutes. We can explain, show it. And what happens with it is that people can get a grasp of what happens with these currencies. John, can you bring up that link I asked for, the openmoney.org?
No, I didn't grab it yet.
It's an architecture.
Let me see.
Just open Chrome.
Coming there.
Aha.
Hear you at this point.
Can you send it again? Sorry about that.
Well, go to openmoney.org.
Mm-hmm.
Go to openmoney.org.
Yep.
And in the top thing, you'll find a link to OMP rather, OM something or other.
OMP? Yep.
Yeah, OMP. Select brief from one of the
Yep.
menus, and then you'll see that's all the graphics. If you scroll down about 6 of the graphics, you get to the Let's Play graphics. There's 2 displays of the chart.
Yep. I see game outcomes.
Yeah, well, first of all, it's a table of numbers. Ignore that. Go to the next one.
All right, community balance.
There you go. Now, what you're looking at there is the sort of the propagation of a system. People all start at the bottom in the center, but as their play and their giving and getting happens, they zigzag up the chart. Positive, negative, earn, spend, earn, spend. And they move up the chart in a sort of like a herringbone method, you know, display the real factor in the computer is not whether you're positive or negative, it's how far up the chart you are. Because that is what your product, your participation, your giving and getting has accumulated. Now, the game we play brings out this dynamic in a way that people can sort of understand it and understand the pros and cons. But it also shows the pros and cons of benchmarking, is the next.
You broke up just a little bit on that one, if you want to repeat that last sentence.
Yeah, the pros and cons of conventional money are a little bit more familiar. And if you see what happens in that second chart, there's a bunch of people on the left, a few who are rich. They've got high balances. Left is positive balance. You want to think about it, turn the chart on its side and you'd see the up and the down. But we generally say left for up and therefore positive, so you've got 2 or 3 people who've got a lot of money. Guess what? If some people have a lot of money, everybody else has a lot less. That's the way. So the way the game plays out is that you get to play both with the 2 currencies and you see how they're just juggling around. Shows up as accessible opportunity for people or constraint, limitation, and self-sabotage, as in the conventional money. Now, it's an interesting game to play. It's a more interesting game to understand. When you understand these graphics, then you will find everything a hell of a lot more intelligible and manageable. So I'm going to leave it at that and just say, I'm sure at some stage you'll find yourself involved with either the game or the graphic, and you'll find it's a gateway to an appreciation that otherwise you're not going to find in any economics textbook. It's just not there. So play on, dude. All right? So, shall we just bump to questions and I can go and have lunch?
Sounds good.
So you said it's not that we can do it, but what is it that we need to do?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, normally we're stuck without the means. We know what we want to do, but there just isn't a method to get there. So we've got an experience of frustration, futility, effort, and, win some, lose a lot. What you've got with a community currency is an ability to construct your future. It's a tool that builds. It's a commonwealth in itself. Each currency set is sort of a living entity. It's a thing with its own behavior, a bit like a swarm of bees or ant colony or something. It's characterized by the individual actions, but those individual actions are all self-resonating rather than self-extracting. Conventional money, our interactions tend to be alienated. I'm going to get as much from you as I can and give you as little as I can. I mean, that's life. And we got to look after number one. And then when I've got your money, I go and spend it somewhere else, so it's not coming back to you either. So in the conventional world, we are definitely not generous. We cannot project ahead with any strong reliability. But within community currencies, you can. I'm very excited at the prospect of the next decade in terms of constructive society, collaborative effectiveness.
One question. So based on your experience with the lead system, can you share a little bit about what were the lessons learned, both the positive things that worked and things that led to challenges, whether that's structural or with the people who were using it, or the system?
Nothing structural. The basis of a mutual credit system is like a wheel. Now, if you're going to consider transportation or mechanics, the wheel is a component device. Now, different size wheels, different conditions, different circumstances, but the wheel is a bloody wheel, right? Now, the mutual credit model, whether it's a time bank or a barter business or a lead system or an open value network or whatever, it's just a wheel. It's a question of what size wheel did you wear out and how did people understand what they were doing with it. And that's where we realized that if people don't understand what they're doing, then when it goes slightly wrong, they assume the sky has fallen and it's all over. It's just like that. I knew this wasn't going to work. Because people feel innately foolish at doing something outside the convention, particularly around money. You don't want any of it to think you're a fool with money, do you? And certainly not the business community. So what we found was that we've had to make it so simple, clear-cut, and cannot lose, so that a business can become part of in a fail-safe, totally secure, no cash flow problem. Right. Now, we didn't have that in our first lead system. In fact, we only had one system for everything, which is trying to put all the things in one pot. Nowadays, we look very definitely in terms of a time bank for the time people, tool sharing for the tool sharers, housing co-ops, productive farming systems, and Main Street commercial, community support, school funding. If it's tangible and they're manageable, then people are going to adopt them and play. What we learned is that if they stand back and think about it and do 2 transactions in every 6 months, nothing happens and they don't learn and there's no progress. So all comes down to it works and what matters is that people see their opportunity and take it on.
So you're talking about multiple solutions working together that are cooperative.
Yes, and people minding their own business. I mean that in a positive sense. I mean, it's like these networks are empowered by the people who are productively producing and earning and spending and earning within them in good balance, you know? And the people who don't get it and try and tip it off or something, they just spit out. They're not a cost. They're not a problem. Don't worry about the deadheads. But the people who say, listen, as I live in my community, so the community is the reflection of my behavior. So I don't have to start saying, no, watch him, be careful about that guy, we're going to set credit limits, and you can't do this or that or the other. Those are all interventions in a natural resonance. And it's that natural release of people being productive but personally responsible for the productivity and consumption. That's the way in, and it's what offers. Now you ask a short question, see what sort of answers you get.
Thank you.
So I have one question. I'm trying to understand that if we're talking about nodes or networks of mutual credit that can then in turn interact with other nodes and networks of mutual credit, because I'm listening and it sounds like, you know, there's a danger of being trapped inside of a bubble. You know, that you can only work with the people that are in close proximity, and you don't have the opportunity to, you know, expand and reach out, you know, into the further seams of, you know, the larger community. So that's one question, and my other question is do you think this is a solution for poverty? And what if within these networks there are people that don't have anything to trade, any marketable or tradable skills other than their labor?
Thank you. Good points, obviously. And they're both basically in the same area. They're about the flexibility and the resilience. With regard to being trapped inside a bubble, no, think about it rather that you're connected like a sort of a membrane or network. And that in the geographic space, there may be 10, 20 of these networks coexisting. Now, you can be a part of this network and that network and the other. So the idea is not to be sort of linking the two networks together to devices to be federated, you know, form a republic of these 12 systems or something. That's really the wrong way to go. The way is to have each one be its own sort of neo-tribal community. And you're participating in those that work for you. Now, that brings us to the second point of what happens to people who are sort of low on the skill level, disabled, that have high costs in various ways. Well, all I can say is they'll do far better in the context of these networks than they're currently doing in the context of the existing network. So it's not going to do them any damage to have these around as supportive. You see, within these networks, a high earner, and there will be plenty of people who are high earners, like the dentist or the grocery store or whatever. It's easy for them to earn this money. It's easy for them to spin it back through staff, through purchasing. But one of the ways they can also spin it back is through community service. They can throw their, maybe 10% of their gross in community currency could end up in a community pot. And that will do the business no harm, do them a lot of good, and it'll do the community a lot of good. So the ability for the economy to take care of its own, for the economy to become more like a family than, I don't know, a chamber of commerce. We've turned our communities into marketable opportunities. You know, and what we've got to get back to is a sense we are invested in our world and that we have a responsibility to everybody within it. Now, the conventional money does not make that easy. It makes that a contentious fight. This money is ideally suited to feeding back and flowing back towards broader social. So I think my bottom line would be, A, they'll get better handling. Another factor is they will find that they do have skills. All sorts of people who think they have no skills in the conventional market, but have been kicked out, marginalized, deprecated, turns out they've got a hell of a lot to offer in social networks, support, helping out here, doing that, fixing an old tool of some sort. You never know what people really got when it comes down to it. And this context, it merges human capacities and potential very immensely. It draws people out of themselves, because the real reality of this is all in community. We can't do it all. So it's all about the connection.
Michael, do you think it would be useful to pull up really quick the Only Connect piece, the network view, the network map of the program?
Later, you can do that.
Okay.
Yeah, you can explain all this stuff. Basically,
is there any other questions at the moment?
Why is this lunchtime?
yeah.
If you
So
have any
we're
closing,
okay?
yeah, any closing remarks, then we'll
Thank you.
we'll sign off. Yeah, thanks so much.
All right, well, good luck, guys. I gotta say, John's got a really powerful handle on this stuff. If you can't get an answer out of John, then ask him to push it on to me, but I don't think you'll need to. He's really got it down. So, have fun.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Michael.
Bye, man.
Take care. Before we move on, any other comments, questions, and thoughts?
I think this way makes a lot of sense, and I think if we could find a way to do it, I think it wouldn't be as much poverty. If we were further put back into our communities and like the stores, et cetera, like he was speaking on.
Mm-hmm.
Why hasn't this been more, why hasn't this been pushed more towards the younger generation of social networking and whatnot? Why hasn't this idea been spread more through those channels? Because I haven't ever heard of this idea. And like we talked earlier, the biggest issue that I saw amongst all our groups is not knowing. Mm-hmm. And I feel like using some of these tools that is a part of our generation could be useful for getting this idea out and changing our ideology on the economy.
I think there's two answers. One, we were having a conversation here earlier today. There's a rich history of cooperativism within the African American community, but people don't know that. And so you look back towards the social constructs, towards the fear around the organizing and the violence that was associated with some of that organizing. Big media doesn't necessarily have the biggest game in a program like this. So that's one piece. I think the other piece is that it can be challenging. My impression from being immersed in this material for about 6 months now is that it's really location specific how you're going to do these and how you're going to tool these, and it requires good relationships and a level of trust with people. Because of the examples that I've shared, a lot of them are either high trust networks because they share identity, because they have a common practice amongst themselves, or out of desperation, out of really, this community has no money. And so I think part of the challenge of getting that system to be replicated or scaled or any of these things comes down to that it's really local specific. And so it's really not optimized for scaling, it's optimized for being good in the place that it's developed.
Just to add on, I listened to this talk by Douglas Rushkoff. Are you guys familiar? You should look him up. I think you'd be really interested in a lot what he has to say. But he was talking at South by Southwest, and really, it was kind of a bold thing, I think, running the LET system on like old school 80s computers, right? Like the technology now exists. Like Google connects the world, Facebook connects the world, and rather than connecting the world to empower individuals, they sold shares, and they're held accountable to Wall Street, not to the people that they're trying to connect, and so they just profited off of those connections. And really, this guy is pretty powerful when he speaks, but it's like, you have to call that out. That's why it hasn't happened, is because people created all these things to make it happen, and then in the end, they sold out. And really, who are we to say that we wouldn't do the same? Like when you're like, oh, I can sell this for how many $1 billion? And so it keeps feeding into itself where people are almost there, and then they go and they just profit off of what they almost got to, making it even more difficult to get to that place again.
Well,
Did you have a question as well?
yeah, no, I was going to say that, conventionalism is kind of hard to escape because it's so ingrained in us, so, it's how we're used to thinking. And so as I'm listening to all these explanations, I'm wondering, where are the metrics, like where's the numbers, quantify how it works, prove to me, why this should be, the system that we're using. And so I'm so used to having that under a conventional system when you say, okay, this can work because of X, Y, Z, and we can show you the numbers. And so I'm wondering, is there any way to quantify this with conventional metrics that we can understand better?
I mean, I think the 50, like some of these numbers are pretty clear, and the system is numbers to a degree. Is recording it into ledgers with, different read-write permissions, or like maybe not everybody can see all the ledgers of everybody, but just one last comment towards why it hasn't spread. I think part of it is that it's not marketable by conventional means. Like the value of it is never going to be US dollars, and that's the primary vector by which we move ideas around the globe at the moment is what profits, what sells, what goes viral. And this is not a monetary, like it's a monetary system, but it's not commodified. And it's another value system, and that's where some of the paradigm shift in like we have to build culture around it for it to really be a valuable asset and practice of social capital, or what say you?
I didn't quite understand his explanation for being stuck in a bubble. Because he was talking about how there would be 20 different communities recognizing other communities' types of money, but let's say you move from New York to LA, how will your money, or you have your conventional money, but how will your community currency work over there if it's a different currency?
Yeah, and that's, so the Sardex project that I mentioned that's moving 51 million euros is like a clearinghouse to help different communities relate to one another and exchange. The kind of network view that he was talking about is so these systems only work if it's a closed system, but as we have multiple families, and I think this is something really that our generation can pick up on too. Not just our generation though, but people who have been exposed to the internet for a little bit of time now. This idea, Whitman says it, I contradict myself, so I contradict myself. I contain multitudes. That we have these multiple personas and relate to people in different ways, in different contexts. I have my work persona, I'm the hobbyist in this field, whatever. I'm a resident of this community, Crown Hill, different ways that we relate. So you see these multiplicity of networks in that exchange can start to pass through, and hopefully eventually a community currency emerges that can go across. Some might argue Bitcoin is that. I have significant issues with how Bitcoin was designed, but there's more and more. There's Faircoin too, which is also a blockchain, based on the same technology as the Bitcoin, and is a little bit smarter in design in terms of not just rewarding people who can buy a bunch of servers. So there is ways to go, but I think part of the idea is like, this isn't going to be a top-down solution. We're not going to like reinvent the global economy and then fix our local community's economy. It goes the other way, I think.
And I think what you're talking about with the putting all of it in one, was it, I think that was about, is that about trust and having a certain network within a specific trade? Like they talked about the commercial barter. Those, maybe there's certain companies that work with each other on a regular basis, so they create their own kind of exchange system. I don't know if that's the sense that you get about why he was advocating for multiple rather than one monolithic currency. Is that, do you know if that's why he was advocating for
So you have
multiple?
multiple currencies going on at once, you eventually you have like 4 or 5 different types of community currencies.
I think that's what I thought he was implying.
Yeah, definitely. So it's a matter of resiliency. It's a matter of we don't know the exact solution because we've been using this money that's had these really negative effects for a long time, and our national government is not encouraging different practices of this stuff. And lastly, I think it's about like free association is what comes to my mind, is that you associate with the coin that represents your values and that you trust the community using it. Like there's social capital, but there's also, so social capital is supposedly structural capital, like the connections that we have if we drew us on a map and the strength of our relationship, our ties. And then cognitive capital, and then relational capital. Relational capital being what drives a lot of collective action. Relational capital is how much I identify with this group here. Relational capital is how much I trust all the individuals in the Kepra group, for example, or in this neighborhood. It's the sense of obligation I feel to that community. Like I get a lot of support from this community, so I feel obligation to support it. And it's the amount of like norms, like do I recognize the norms of the community and abide by them. So I think those are some of the pieces that define these, and people are going to use different currencies based on that.
I was just gonna say too, like with the multiple currencies, the way that I've understood it just being a guitar player, like really simple things like you're constantly trying to experiment with sound and like having to get new gear, having to get like different pedals, different ways of playing, and like that all just costs money, and it usually just like is stuff you're buying on Craigslist and da. But wouldn't it be cool if there was like a musician's currency where you could be exchanging all of these different things that you would need, that other people need? Because usually you don't stick with the same pedals for more than a couple years, and then you want to move on to different sounds. And so like that would be an example, like in my own field, where I see like, oh, if there was a musician currency, that would be great.
Yeah, because I was talking about that earlier when we like first broke off into our groups and like theater, and the balance of like, I'm like with me, I want to open my own theater company, and I would rather have somebody give me resources rather than give me money.
Yeah.
So like I don't want somebody to give me money so I can go buy the materials to buy a set. I'd rather them just give me the materials to buy the set and then cut out the whole middle ground of it.
Mm-hmm. And what's cool is that if you have a friend who really wants to contribute in that way, but they don't have those materials, but their friend does,
Yeah.
that this is something that you can see happen through a community currency maybe.
Wow.
And, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, wow, just good ideas.
I think one thing that stuck out to me from what he said was the using of multiple strategies to change the culture. Housing cooperatives, time banks, currency, that it was part of like a larger system where people are relying on each other for things that they might not necessarily be able to get from a currency. Like, I don't know if you can do like housing with currency very easily, but there are other ways to do that that help support community and help support each other.
Yeah.
That's what stuck out to me.
Yeah, there's just a lot of interesting things that this can enable. I'm working with one big network of different enterprises out of New Zealand, and they have a virtual banking software that enables them to do virtual currencies within it and between members. And one thing that, one of the use cases in regards to housing, there's the Embassy Network in San Francisco is a cooperatively run B&B. And so you make a guarantee how much money your room's gonna make per month, but maybe you're not staying there all the time. Maybe you're leasing, like, you know, having people come into B&B. And so one thing that they found interesting about virtual currencies is instead of when somebody comes and stays at their house, that person pays the room owner, and then at the end of the month, the room owner pays the cooperative. Instead, they can have the room owner get credits, and it immediately discounts what they would pay in rent. So if people came and stayed at the house, they would not have to pay anything for the month. And so that eliminates 2 transactions within that. There's not money going from the client to the owner and the owner to the cooperative. It's just client to the cooperative.
So let me ask you this question: how does it work for like community services? So when people, you know, have skills or they do things that are not necessarily of tangible value, but that offer you security, safety, and things of that nature, you know, how do those, you know, how do you compensate those people within the system like that?
For example, give me an example of service.
The police and fire will be a community service. Obviously, you think about snow removal and things of that. That's kind of tangible. You can trade that for something. But you know, basically that, you know, providing safety, maybe even psychological and social services. You know, some of these other services that are not, you know, really tangible or that you can directly trade, but are more for the community good.
I was gonna say, it gets back to if you have the basic needs involved in the system, right? Because it's not a substitute throwing out the whole system we have. It's a supplement. So it's like if you have grocery stores involved with this like community currency, if you have entertainment involved with like this community currency, trying to think of like some other like really basic needs that people, or things that people are spending at least like, for me, like half of my income like I look at it, it's like, oh, food and entertainment, you know? So it's like, if you can create a currency where I'm not having to use half of like my income, then people are like more willing to be paid, okay, I'll take partial payment in this community currency because I know that I can use that payment to go buy my groceries. I can use that payment to pay for a lot of the things that I do anyway. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
But how would you start that though? If I wanted to in my community to go out and start a community currency and for like the services, for instance, how would I get grocery stores involved and local services involved? I guess that's kind of a bigger picture for me is how would you start that on a local level?
Yeah, I think it's just approaching those businesses and asking them to make their commitment to the community visible in this way.
Why should?
Because businesses are already donating to nonprofits to get that sort of validation from the community anyway. People already do loyalty programs. I mean, the schools were selling coupons for grocery stores. You know, that's recent activity. I don't know that they do it so much now, but 10 years ago, you could go and buy coupons. And it's the same program, actually. It's literally the only difference is that it's multiple businesses and multiple nonprofits. So, I mean, even like Musical Family Tree is a music nonprofit that approached the tool lending library, and they're like, oh, we'd like to give your members discounts on using our co-working space and in return for discounts on the tool lending library, on the convenience fee or whatever. And so we're just saying like, great, let's do that and have a partnership with the Community Controlled Food Initiative and even more importantly, have connections with actual producers who produce food, who produce some of these harder needs.
Yes, I asked that question through the lens of a traditional business owner who may not share your values and perspectives about what you're trying to accomplish. So then how would I convince, I'm a new kid on the block. I don't have necessarily a body of work in this arena. I approach this business in my neighborhood I think, find some ways to work with folks who are not necessarily in alignment with this new way of doing and being, to get them on board. The piece that Butler did with the rainbow, with the water park, what was it called?
Make change.
Make change, where they actually have a coin
Right.
that they created, had value in the community, and if you went out and did certain things with water, you would get these coins that could then be used in community spaces, either for purchase, and then those vendors could actually take those coins and turn them back into the Butler CUE for cash. And I don't want to get too far, okay? But it's even that model where the business owner would actually get a cash return for offering the service, was still very difficult and did not acquire stickiness that made it long-term sustainable. So I definitely, this resonates with me, and I'm always looking at what are the challenges and barriers to make it stick in a culture that's really anti-community, anti-sharing as a way of doing business. Then last thing, I'll be quiet. The young man over here talked about why do we not know more about this? And I would argue because we don't have the interest in it in a broader way. John's interest in this has to do with a particular philosophical underpinning, saying how do I go about bringing about change in community, and how can I create and utilize tools? So I said through that, these guys' passion to go and find these opportunities, these tools, has led to this particular discussion and effort to move into the world. So for me, the first thing is identification of folks who have already decided this old model is not a model that resonates with what it is you want to see happen in the community. And through that, then these tools finally come out of the ground. One more point, then I'll be quiet. For me, I struggle with tools. I really do. I do find them important, but the tools have to support building relationships in the community, because it's the relationships that create the social and relational and cultural capital. So, two personal examples today. I need to go to the grocery store, and I came over to Alvin, we borrow your car. Well, that required a relationship grounded in trust for him to loan me the car. So if all you guys have cars, you just loan your car to anybody? No. In fact, some folks you're not gonna ever loan your car to. So the first piece is that relationship piece that then leads to increased social capital in communities. At that point, you're not even necessarily looking for an exchange. So I wouldn't say, yeah, I'll loan you my car, but next time you need to loan me X, Y, and Z. So if I never repay that, it's our relationship that has allowed that to happen. So finally, I get a phone call from a close friend of mine a few minutes ago who's been asked to attend a meeting, and he said he would go, and then after he said yes, he comes to find out 3 other folks have been invited to this meeting. So he calls me as a friend, said, "You know these people? Do you trust these other folks in the room?" And so I said, "Oh, I wouldn't go." Yes, I know these other folks, and no, I would not go to that meeting for that reason. So it is your relationships at the end of the day that lead to the increased social capital in communities. These tools can help facilitate that and leverage that, but they have to be driving us back to some connections with each other to build community.
A quick quote before Suki and toss it your way. If you want a bunch of folks to build a boat, you don't tell them how great this boat is going to be. You instill in them a longing, a yearning for the ocean. You know, that future state. Go ahead, Suki.
Just thinking about the question, like, how do we actually get capitalist businesses involved? This is a thought I've been having. Would it actually be necessary to explain it that much to the businesses as like, hey, we're creating this community currency? Like, to me, wouldn't it just be easier to like go to businesses that we already know have a relationship with nonprofits and are already donating so much because businesses have to do that, and just getting them to switch the way in which they're donating, and like, and then once that happens, they're going to see their profit margins go up. Like, it is going to work for them. So like, couldn't we just be like, oh, actually we've seen like, there's a better way that you can donate that'll like benefit our organization more and actually be less money up front for you? Because I feel like the words like less money up front for you is like the green light for businesses. So I don't know if like, would it actually be necessary?
Start with the easy food.
Yeah, and then once like more are involved.
I'm just saying, I don't think that, I do think it's possible to get the other guys involved, but it's by looking at their lens and their ideas for opportunity, and then craft a narrative through that lens.
Yeah.
So let's just say you got somebody off the street that's got a product that you want the community to have access to without all the excess cost you want to involve. You create the incentive here. Hey, here's a great idea. I know you don't think it's a great idea necessarily. So here, let's try this for 30 days. And we'll demonstrate to you how participating in this program is going to have a net gain in your bottom line. So I was just challenging us to always be looking at your opposition and how you can leverage those resources in the project too. But yeah, I definitely agree with you. Start with your friends, not necessarily enemies.
Talking about those relationships and trust, what if a community doesn't trust each other as a whole? There's just one pockets and they just don't trust each other. And then the money ends up being hoarded, and that's the exact opposite of the goal of this. And then you will see profits actually reduce in the businesses, and actually the economy will actually be worse than before.
I think it's, again, the key is the relationship building, and this is a tool by which we do it. I mean, that was my initial interest in this program, is this seemed like a quick and easy way that I can go and talk to just about anybody about stuff that's going to matter to them, because most people got money issues. And so this is a widespread way, and can you start a program like this in a community that doesn't have relationships in a month? Definitely not. In 6 months? Definitely not. Year? Probably not. Like, you know, this is part of a process. And I guess just like what I'm excited about this is that I feel like some of that community energy is brewing in this neighborhood, and that some of these connections exist, and there's been projects like Make Change, Indy. There is a time bank in town that is slowly, hasn't gained momentum yet, but you know, has a sizable following still. And I think there is an economic argument to make to the businesses, like definitely, just like looking at, well, one, in the case of Isaiah with the 888s, like he would go to community meetings to try and get like the credibility that he needed to run a business here in the neighborhood, and hired ex-cons or whatever. But I think there's this idea of, by documenting the value, and the idea that like with a system like this, we can change the definition of value. And if we document that value, we can actualize the wealth behind it and leverage that wealth for our communities. And so I think as you look towards, like, if we can get a percentage of the businesses in this neighborhood onto a system, then it is like they can start topping off their employees' wages with this. You know, this becomes an actual, like any other currency, this becomes valuable because local businesses have needs. The local businesses have to pay for staff. Local businesses pay for coffee. You know, if you got a coffee roaster on this program, you can literally say this is going to save you at least that coffee budget and get you closer knit with these folks, get more people in the door. That's going to lead to more transactions for you. So I think there is an economic case, but I think we got to think long and hard about it and really practice that rap.
Try it. You know, I'm an old guy who's skeptical, but I do think we should make some attempt to do it. Again, for me, you know, we have been at this game for a long time, and almost all our strengthened. We all end up feeling the pressures of this, you just mentioned in reference, folks who have good ideas, and when the idea gets to a place where it looks like they can make millions of dollars, they say, oh, well, the next good idea. So it's not the tool, it's the communities that you build that are in this for other reasons other than the measurement. We've been accused from anchor institutions of being like Flintstones. And that's because often folks perceive that we're not using the appropriate tools and processes to bring about the kind of change we're trying to bring in the world. So I'm just going to always be pushing this piece about relationship as primary, and measurement as secondary. Even though I don't disagree. The CCFI, our food initiative, we better measure. We better measure the number of participants, cost of goods, and where can we leverage more opportunities for survival. It's critical to the work.
Just a quick direct response, and I want to take his. Did you? I'm sorry.
I was just going to mention the young lady, Shante, who came today because of a member of our team who advocated this is something you need to involve. How do you measure that?
That's very true. Just a quick response is I mean, that's been my biggest learning coming and working with Kepler Institute is the informal ways and the benefit that can come from not imposing abstract measurement systems onto things. And I guess like through that lens, why I'm excited about this program is I feel like it hits a sweet balance between documenting that value, actualizing the wealth, but also being messy enough and experimental enough and like no caps on negatives and positives, and there's a number there but doesn't mean anything really. It's just our commitment to our community. Like these are just words and actions really, like or words becoming actions. So that's what I feel. I want to return to the group exercise to close out, but I'll give you your last comment here.
As we was talking about the relationships, I think that's not so much different than our current system. And in capitalism, relationships are still important. You still have to have those networks in order to be successful. I think, and even the trust. And trust can break down even within a general business arrangement, and that's the end of that business arrangement. And once the trust breaks down, so that's not so much different. I think that the difference is moving from a mentality where everyone does what's best for themselves, right, to doing something that's more what's good for the entire community. And that's number one. And then number two, the complexity. It seems to be more complex in terms of having to assign value to what you have to offer versus what I have to offer, or what the time that now, like my time can be worth more than yours based upon what I know and what I can do. And so that's very simple. When you have a currency where I can say, well, this is what you're worth, I'll pay you this, and that's it. And so I think you battle, two things that, like trust is not the same, but you battle the mentality and then also the complexity versus the simplicity.
I think some of it can be simple though too, like my hour's worth your hour. That's like the time bank. It's like straight, just 1 hour is the hour.
I just wanted to say something about the hoarding that you brought up. He said, what if like somebody ends up like hoarding community currency, and so with a community currency, it can't be invested. So like you can't go and take community currency to the stock market and get it to make money for itself. So get like someone hoarding it, like it's only useful if that person is using it. So like there's no benefit.
I would also contest based on that. Money is very complex as it stands, like with taxes and the whole yada yada.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying it's simple, but in terms of transactions, it's simple.
But then also because you can create multiple currencies within a community, if there ends up being like a community currency that's sort of taken over by bad faith actors and like people see them abusing the system, people will be like, cool, we're making one and you can't act within it. Or, you know, like these people got together and tried to take over the community, right? This will happen. Like, so then you're like, fine, we're creating one outside of that then, because we're not dealing with, we don't have trust with you and we're not investing in our lack of trust with you.
So I wanna bring us back to those original economic barriers that we talked about. Talked about like information, opportunity, communication, lack of transportation, working at your passion, but needing food. These are local economic barriers we identified at the beginning. And needing resources and maybe lack of social capital to know like where to get that, to borrow that resource or get in contact with the right person. So I want to use the same model we did last time, 1 minute of introspection. We'll do 2 minutes with a partner. It can be the same person, could be a different person. We'll just see how it works out. 4 people, and then we'll come back to the main group.
So what do we think?
Thinking about, in terms of those economic barriers, thinking about these tools that we've talked about today, the tools of local currency, what solutions can we possibly envision to some of these economic barriers we've encountered in our lives? Let's share these beautiful insights y'all are coming up with. Let's cross-pollinate these maybe a little bit. Good point. Cool. Well, y'all were having a great discussion. I could hear very partially. Anybody want to share some pieces of that?
You get to go this time. You go first.
Well, I think
Because I'm the spokesperson.
You be the spokesperson. He's the spokesperson.
I think we came up with more questions than answers, to be honest. Because we were struggling to see, how, changing into a system like this would directly affect some of the things that we identified that are economic barriers. But 2 of the things we could see was community support would definitely, we believe, improve because you would need really to lean upon everyone in your immediate community in order for something like this to work. What else did we say? The community support and possibly education because you will want to support everyone's ability within that community. But in a traditional sense, we came up with the question, would education, traditional education, be as important as, say, a vocation? If you were to change from a capitalist system to a cooperative system.
And we talked about transportation too. We can see the community working together with transportation, kind of similar to almost carpooling, I guess.
Yeah.
Right, that we see in today's, society. So that would even be more enhanced probably for the system.
And one of the more important questions I think we come up with in terms of mentality, we identify mentality as an economic barrier because some people don't have the mentality that they can achieve more in life because of what they were inured with in their life. They think that that's the best that they can do. So one of the questions was, in this particular community or in this society or economy of a cooperative, would there still be people, who are perceived to be worth less than others?
That's a real question for community in general. Yeah. Hopefully we're asking those regardless. Y'all want to chat about what you?
What we talked about is, I guess, near the end we kind of talked about what we could do more to actually try and install these into our community, these ideas. So talking about how sharing the ideas we had here to other people to spread it and become more of a accepting society, these kind of changing ideas of more building up relationships that could then over time create that change or more accepting environments that we could change our community.
Because we can't change necessarily all communities at once without any stigmatism, like that this isn't going to work.
Were there any sort of the economic barriers y'all had talked about? Anything come up solution-wise?
The biggest barrier we thought was just building up that initial trust and worth of how do you, if I need a service done by someone, the only person in the community who has that, and I don't really know them and they don't really know me, how can we build that relationship, that trust, so that way he'll help me out with this? And so we mentioned almost like a Yelp for people, which is very, I mean, that would be bad if we actually did that, but it's almost that idea of how do you, it's just an idea of how do you build a common trust, how do you then, if you start off with no trust or you did something bad and you want to build yourself back up, how do you build that up? You mentioned community service and just different ideas of how, the bare bones of this model is relationship and trust, and how do you build that almost form of credit, that form of validation that you are trusted, you have these relationships.
Yeah. Well, per the Yelp thing, I use Couchsurfing, which is based on references, and I've stayed in 25 different homes for free traveling, and I've hosted 30, 35, and made more friends there than probably any other program. Just for a note, they use qualitative references for people staying like Airbnb does, but it's a all free program. And this group over here. There's a couple of
We were talking about like a main thing that came up was like, I just keep talking about the arts on my mind, but you're talking about how like venues would be very helpful in this situation, because rather than like having to like scramble to find a venue or like paying all this money to get a venue, like all of these artists can kind of cooperatively collaborate inside one shared venue, and then in that case it wouldn't be a matter of like hiring people to upkeep it and, you know, paying rent on it and all that. It would be all these different people coming together to volunteer their time to like upkeep the bathroom and the venue, but also like work the lights and build the set. And rather than just volunteering your time for the sake of loving art, you're also volunteering your time for the sake of getting something in return, like discounted tickets or free tickets even, or like discounted food and beverages. And then from there it can expand to like, art is such a collaboration anyways. And so rather than having this disconnect between people being paid to create and people paying those to create, it's kind of blends into one group more, so everybody was involved in putting this on the stage or like making this music, so you can sit there and be an active participator rather than like put your money into something and then call it a day.
That's awesome. Cool. Any last comments, and then we'll just wrap up.
I don't like. I just final question for you. What did you hope to get out of this workshop today, and did you think you accomplished that?
I had posed the question and was about to, but my hope is that we do another session like this, but more as a co-design session, little study group to a degree, to look at doing an experiment that would be for 30 days or for 90 days, short-term experiment here in the community. So that's, I guess, depends on you all as to whether or not I've achieved that level of interest, whether we could meet here 2 weeks from this date or maybe next month on the same day. I imagine next month is free. I don't know if 2 weeks would be.
There's enough space here.
Make it happen. So I would even propose 2 weeks. I don't know. Maybe people might raise their hand if they'd be interested to come to another session to come.
What's that date?
That's a good question, because there do become. Will I? Okay, I shouldn't say
Yeah,
that.
is he in New York? Okay, that date, man, you're in New York.
Nice. Is that real?
I'm sorry, I need to go and have football practice in 20 minutes. So.
2 weeks? No, that's not true. I'm in town.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you, this was very informative.
That's
Free on Thursday for the co-op reception. Feel free to join 4 to 8, 4 to 9.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Food and music, come join us. No, 2 weeks from now is the 30th.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're in town. Would there be some interested in an experiment? Looking towards an experiment? It's awesome. So yes, yeah, I did totally get what I was.
I'd be interested in the results of it.
And Alvin, you had one last comment?
Oh, no.
Oh, okay.
I'm good.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, everybody.
Can
Then.
I just ask one more time for folks to say who they are and why they're here again?
I'm from IUPUI, and I have to go through community events, and this is one that I was interested in
What
coming
class?
to. It's civic engagement, political action. It's in School of SPIA.
Who's the professor?
Clark.
John.
John.
Okay.
My name's Al, with Kepler Institute. Just always learning and looking for possible ways to do things better.
Yeah, I'm Joseph Dickerson. I'm actually in the same class as what's your name again?
Oh.
I'm bad with names. I've forgotten to go, but there's several events that we could have chosen from, and I thought this was interesting because of we're other things that we're looking at in our class in terms of poverty and different solutions to poverty and in our economy and the equity within our economy. And so I thought I would like to come here and learn about some different types of systems that could possibly work and just broaden my knowledge on this subject.
And what's your name?
I'm actually SPIA major in public safety.
All right, I'm Colin Perry. I'm a sophomore baller and part of the American Visions class, and I chose this event, one, again, kind of my goal is deadline, and two, I'm always interested in learning about different communities, not being from big cities, just learning about that, and also, I guess, learning to build relationships within communities, and I thought this was a good way to talk about it, also from not just economic standpoint, but also from a personal standpoint.
Yeah, Lexi Weitzel, Arts and Administration Theater. I think like the main thing that attracted me to this event was that it kept saying it was interactive, which is what I really liked about it. It wasn't just like sitting here and listening to somebody talk. It was like collaborating, doing what this is trying to get us to do, but at a smaller level, and kind of being like, well, if we can do it here and now, like why can't we keep expanding it?
Awesome.
I'm Tim Carlos. I'm a senior music composition major at Butler, the same American Visions class. And I actually initially came here not knowing what to expect for the most part. I knew what the general topic was, but I think I got a lot more out of it than I thought I was going to. So, thank you for that.
Thank you.
My name is Cade Lambert. I'm also a music composition major, also in this class, and pretty much everything in this base.
I'm in hotel from the Kepler Institute. Real supporter of alternative models to address the challenges of, I want to say first specific to the African American community that I'm working with, but also, the challenges of trying to change the world and creating space to support those challenges and those efforts. So I enjoyed the presentation today. I was in and out of it. I look forward to the collaborative event on Thursday. Should we wear our costumes for Halloween or?
Let's do
I've
it.
got some V for Vendetta masks.
Bring those, please. We can get some great imagery.
I'm Suki Conley. John's my partner, and we talk about this stuff all the time. And so I'm obviously very interested in finding more people that are interested in really starting or doing some sort of test case experiment for Indy, because I think, a lot of people run into issues where it's like, it would have been really useful at a certain point in my life, and I know a lot of people who would be really useful for now, so.
I'm Ashanti Battle, and I'm starting up my own non-for-profit organization for those that are homeless and those that have fallen on hard times.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much again. I'll throw the PowerPoint into the Facebook event, which is again Access Community Power, and I'll send y'all a little follow-up email too, just with the resources, and hope to see you again on October 30th, same time, same place.
And let me add, for Thursday, we're having
Yes,
the author
please.
of Collective Courage, which is about cooperatives and people of color, so primarily in the African American community throughout history, how people come together to support each other. So that author's going to be here at 4 o'clock on Thursday, along with some other speakers.
And we'll be having the grand opening for the Media Tool Lending Library as well, where you can co-own projectors, PAs, MacBooks with Adobe Suite, and check them out at $1 a week. So that'll be a nice co-op evening.
Thanks, Andrew. Thank you.
My pleasure.